Welcome, Simon. Great to have you here. And I wanted to ask you some questions which might be interesting for our viewers.
Okay.
First, when did you begin to play the drums and who were your idols at that time?
I started hitting things, because I didn't have drums, when I was 3.5 years old. And my idol then was the drummer of my dad's band. He had a Dixieland dance band. And I saw him play for the first time, and that was it. So he was my idol. I mean, didn't really know much about anything else. At 3.5 years old, I could barely breathe.
And when you grew up?
Oh, and very soon after that, a few years when I was listening to a lot of jazz, a lot of big band music, because my mom was into that. I mean, all the greats. Buddy Rich, Louis Bellson, Sonny Payne. I mean, you name it. You know, it was all started with jazz. Joe Morello, Dave Brubeck, and then slowly got into rock and roll. I reckon the first rock and roll drummers I really got into would have been Danny Seraphine from Chicago, Bobby Colomby from Blood, Sweat and Tears, Keith Hartley from the Keith Hartley Band, John Heisman, Coliseum, and then later on people like come on, brain. Ian Pace,
Right.
Deep Purple, and I'm sure I'm leaving out a lot of players, but you know, I mean, as I got introduced to a new band or a new type of music, Bill Bruford, yes,
Okay.
you know, so that's usually what happened, and then eventually. I heard for the first time the Mahavishnu Orchestra, John McLaughlin and Billy Cobham, that blew my mind, and he became really my main idol, and still is.
Okay.
I still love his playing, and then of course you got so many great players: Harvey Mason, Lenny White, of course Tony Williams, and then of course you get into
Yeah.
it just goes on and on.
It's getting
Yeah,
more and more.
yeah.
All right. The first time I heard you play was on a record by Jeff Beck called There and Back from 1980. Your style of drumming immediately caught my attention because I never heard something like this before. How did you develop your style?
Well, okay, like most English rock drummers of that era, we all started off playing Dixieland. John Bonham, Ian Pace. So there was that background to playing the shuffle. We all knew we grew up playing a shuffle. We grew up playing dotted eights and triplets. And that's why, the famous Bonham shuffle, which is also the Purdy shuffle and is known also as the Porcaro shuffle, but everybody plays that. It's not, but really it comes from growing up starting off playing jazz, playing Dixieland dance, because every musician did that back in the 50s and the 60s in England. So that was the start. Then the other thing was I started recording sessions very, very early. So there's a lot of discipline that comes with being able to play sessions, not only just reading music, timekeeping, but I was always very interested in the recording process, so I always try to figure out how to play to make the drum sound come through crisp and clear in a recording. Because in those days, it didn't always happen.
Yeah.
It was a lovely sound. It was a very soft sound, but I wanted this much more punchy, funky kind of sound. So I really worked hard. I would listen to a lot of the American session players, Billy Cobham, James Brown, all those records. One of my favorite players was Buddy Miles with Band of Gypsies. He just had this sound and this really fat groove. And so I try to apply that to everything I played, which might sound weird, but that was the concept. So, and I think it shaped the way that my drums started to sound. I went against the grain. Instead of going for that really dead studio 70s sound, I went for the real live kind of more rock, open jazz sound, really, but try to play it real funk, soul vibe. I kind of always mixed up the genres, as it were, which you could do in England. I don't think in America, if I grew up there, I could have got away with that. But in England, you could, because the radio was different. It was much broader, So people were a little bit more open, They weren't so, this has to sound like that. It's like, let's just play the music and, he has his drums tuned this way and he makes them sound like that. But they're good, they work. So I think that's kind of how it, came about.
Okay. Now there's a more technical question. You play open-handed.
Yeah.
What is the reason and what is the advantage for you compared to playing with arms crossed?
Various reasons. One, traditional way of playing really led to bad posture. So if you look at drummers like Chick Webb, Dave Tuff, Buddy Rich, in fact all of those players, they had quite a round-shouldered stance, posture. And my mum was always on at me about not becoming round-shouldered. He said, you'll end up like a hunchback, like the hunchback of Notre Dame, I go, really? Okay. So that was kind of part of it. And I actually thought about it a lot. The other thing was I was very into the ambidextrous kind of vibe, because we spend our lives working on our weaker hand. And so all the right hand drummers want to try to get their left hand stronger. I mean, it's kind of just what we do, And I thought, well, instead of just working on it from a technique point of view in terms of fast, why don't I work on it in a different way as a way to lead with the left? Because you work on your technique, but you still are right heavy. You lead, it's like all this. So I try to really swap it around. I thought that would be good. The other thing was my drum kit was growing, double bass drum, and it was a physical problem. The hi-hat, to be able to play it, here's the snare, here's the hi-hat. It was really uncomfortable. So I thought, I wonder if I can play left-handed. I didn't know if it could be done. I'd never seen anybody play like that until I was doing a gig with my dad at London Airport, Heathrow, and the drummer in the other band was playing with his left hand on the hi-hat. And I went, wow, that's a weird way to play. And then a few years later, I finally got to see Billy Cobham, and he's playing with his left hand on the hi-hat. So I'm going, and then shortly thereafter, I saw Lenny White, and I said, what's going on? Everybody's playing with their left hand on the hi-hat. So I just swapped.
I finally became a fan of you when I listened to the Pete Townsend solo records. Mm-hmm. I think your drumming matched his songs perfectly by giving them your special touch. How much freedom did you have to bring in your own ideas?
Total freedom. But again, this is what I'm talking about, the discipline side. You have to know where the boundaries are. Most young drummers haven't discovered that yet, because with my dad was very, very strict, and he was all about musical discipline. His thing was the public have to dance to this music, so they want to hear a good solid groove. They don't want to hear anything else going on. And so that's how I learned to play. And then doing sessions, same thing. You have to know what to play and what not to play. So when I say I have freedom, Pete would play the demo, said, this is how it goes, let's go and play it. So I just came up with parts and stuff, but it all worked with the music because I had the experience and the discipline to be able to know how to push the envelope. And I'd always push the envelope because I wasn't happy to settle for just the simplest or the first way of playing it. I was trying to look for a different angle. And the producer might say, I think it needs to be a little just straighter, just down the center. And I said, fine. But at least it was worth a try. But with Pete, he loved it. His music is so playable, and that's what makes the big difference.
Great. You were one of the hardest working session drummers and freelancers for many, especially European artists, in the 80s and 90s. Why did you decide to join Toto and move to the USA?
Well, I decided to move to the USA first. I had been, since I was about that high, I wanted to live in the States. I didn't even know that Los Angeles and New York weren't here. I had no idea, I had no concept of East Coast and West Coast. But all my favorite musicians were American. And I used to look on the back of albums and look at all these people and, oh, these guys come from Chicago, these guys come from New York, this is a Boston band, this is, Tower of Power comes from Oakland, and you know what I mean? I was aware of all that. Dr. John from New Orleans, but I always wanted to be in America. And I had, there's a couple of opportunities to do that earlier, but I just thought, maybe not. Until the early 90s, 1990, I was going there a lot anyway to work. And I thought, you know what, I really want to leave England now. I've done this. I want to go, new challenge. So that's what I did. And it's there's a lot of bureaucratic BS you got to go through, especially if you're moving on your own. If you're with a band, with a record company or publishing company, it's easy because they'll take you. They'll take care of all the thing. But when you're on your own, it's pretty tough to be legal, And I was, at that time, a little too high profile to not do it legally. Do you see what I mean? I would have been right at the customs. I say, oh, what you know what I mean? Having just done the Who tour, and I mean, so I had to go through, through hoops to do it. It was pure coincidence that Toto, Lukather rang me up about a month after Jeff passed away and asked me if I would play the tour with him. That was out of left field. I mean, I had no idea. It was kind of weird. I mean, I really didn't know what to say. I was like, really? Me playing Toto? Wow. But you see, because Toto was such a close-knit band, and it was Jeff Porcaro's band, it was Jeff's and David Page's, they started that band, and suddenly Jeff's no longer there, so you never think about it. I mean, it's just, the concept's kind of strange. But then I did think about it, and they were serious. They said, look, we've got this tour, 42 shows, we got like 40 people employed. If you don't do it, we may not do the tour. We may cancel it, And I went, yikes. Okay, well, and then I said yes. And little did I know I'd be there for 21 years. Shit happens.
Okay. I'm sorry. I did it wrong. Your cooperation with Tama drums, Zildjian cymbals, and Promag sticks lasts for almost 40 years now. Almost? More than?
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Okay.
38 years.
Yeah. Today, switching endorsements from time to time seems to be normal. Why have you been so loyal to these companies?
I don't have the energy. I don't have the energy to change. No, it's to my generation. We were very lucky to not have to buy our equipment. So when I got my first endorsement, I felt really honored and really privileged. And it's something you don't take lightly when you grow up in the 60s, and especially in England, where we couldn't even afford American equipment. It was too expensive to buy. And I was working, earning a living as a musician. So, but even still, to buy a whole Ludwig kit, it was like, yikes, it's just different. So we made do with what we could. And when, eventually I did get a Ludwig kit, and I had a large Ludwig Octoplus, which I used for all my sessions. Tama approached me in 1978 in Japan, and I was looking for a different type of kit. I was using single heads at the time. I wanted double heads. So, and again, little did I know I'd still be using Tama in 38 years. It's more than just the instrument. It's the people, and it's the way that they've treated me. Back in the 80s, if I needed a drum kit in Barbados, they got me one there. It was amazing. And, that's expensive to do. Even back then, when things were a lot more kind of, there was a lot more money around, and you would do that. I never forgot that. So as long as the quality of the equipment was always good, I was happy. But again, and I notice how some players would swap, but you got to understand it's the same with record companies and a band. Life doesn't stay still. It's cyclic. And every company is going to go through a lull. And so from a professional musician, as long as my drums are working beautifully, and as long as they can get me a kit somewhere, even if they change the way the stands work and blah, 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 but it still works, it's worth hanging in there because they're going to get back up again. So that's really it.
Tell us about the favorite projects you have been busy with during the last years, and what are your plans for the future?
After leaving Toto, I was very lucky to join a band which was actually much more jazz. I kind of left the rock and roll scene a little bit and went much more to the jazz scene. Hiromi, Japanese pianist, and bass player Anthony Jackson. Hiromi put together this project 6 years ago, and it's been amazing. I mean, we played all over the world, jazz festivals all over the place. I've met a lot of young and upcoming jazz musicians that I didn't even know existed. It's wonderful. All these wonderful festivals in, Italy and South America, Japan, China. I mean, it's amazing. So that's been fabulous. Plus, being able to get back into protocol and making new music with my band and going on the road with my band. And I've just finished my latest record, Protocol 4, which will be coming out in October this year. And it's a new band, and it's very exciting.
Now, the last question. I'm sure there are a lot of interesting or funny anecdotes you experienced. Is there anything remarkable you would like to tell us?
Oh, there's a lot, but there's a lot I can't tell you. But actually today, funnily enough, we were sound checking. We had a little bit of issue with the PA system, and we were trying to fix it. And I had a bright idea. Maybe we should do this. And I went behind the amp rack and switched everything. And about 10 seconds after I'd done that, all the power went. And I went, oh shit. And I know a bit about electronics, so I went, there's no way just swapping the sub outputs could have taken all the power in half of Hamburg out. But but it wasn't anything to do with me. It was we're not really sure what happened, but somebody hit the wrong button. And I was thinking, okay, backup plan. How are we going to do this? Emergency lighting, which is on a battery, but you can't see very clearly. No music. So I said, well, quick, improvise. So I said, if we don't have electricity by 7 o'clock, we're going to take that drum kit, put it down on the ground, get everybody on the stage and all around, so at least they can see what's going on, and we'll just do the clinic that way. But magically the electricity came back, so we continued with our sound check. But this happens all the time. And as a professional musician, I was brought up where the show must go on, no matter what. Even when you're really sick, you always perform. That's what our business is all about. And you have to learn to improvise. I don't mean just musically, I mean everything, every way. And that's what I love about the whole business. It's great.
Okay. So we are looking forward for your clinic this evening. Thank you very much for the very interesting interview.
Cool. There we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.